A huge army marching with blue and gold flags prepares for a great battle. The soldiers advance firmly, gripping their long spears, ready for the inevitable combat. That entire multitude of warriors is positioned before a huge, imposing fortress. At the top of the structure, a powerful man observes all the movement with a very confident look. He breaks into a wide smile as he watches the grand display of power by his own troops. One of his subordinates approaches respectfully, while the leader rests in his chair. The man bows and extols the supreme power of the cult that will soon dominate the lands. Known as the celestial demon Qian, he agrees that things should be this way. The subordinate then confesses to having a doubt, and the powerful leader orders him to speak up right away. The servant points curiously at the extremely expensive, new equipment the soldiers are using. The warriors wear impeccable, high-level armor that looks like it cost a fortune. He questions how they managed to get so much funding, since the cult's finances were completely depleted. The leader calmly takes a sip of tea and reveals that someone simply offered a loan. The warrior is in absolute shock, unable to believe his master's direct response. Qian calmly repeats that a man appeared out of nowhere offering money. The servant begins to sweat profusely, thinking that no sane person would make a loan to the demonic sect. He tries to find a logical explanation, and suddenly his eyes widen as he has a mental epiphany. He quickly clasps his hands together, excited as he deduces what must have actually happened there. The man concludes that the warlords surrendered to fear and handed over the funds voluntarily. He praises the leader's genius for draining the enemy without spilling a single drop of blood. The leader cuts him off and says it was just some crazy guy who handed over the money. Qian complains, saying that he's not a bandit to go around robbing people like that. With all the calm in the world, he puts his hand inside his clothes to retrieve an important document. He pulls out a piece of paper and explains that he only stamped his seal there to have the money deposited immediately. Showing the contract, he comments that the person was very polite and his name was Manager Kim. The servant turns pale when he realizes that a loan of that size was made based solely on a piece of paper. At the bottom of the page there is a special clause written in red that catches the warrior's attention. The man's eyes widened in complete panic as he read the details of that highly suspicious agreement. The contract clearly states that if payment is not made, the debtor's internal energy will be confiscated. He becomes desperate upon seeing the extreme punishment and notices that the due date is today. The servant is completely speechless and begins to sweat profusely at the absurd situation. He tries to calm himself down by saying that the contract is just a formality, and that the money already belongs to the leader. The man says with a smile that even overcoming this condition today means nothing against their power. Qian praises his intelligence and says he will reward Manager Kim with gold after the victory. The servant heaps further effusive praise upon the glorious and ruthless celestial demon of the holy sect. Faced with this, the great leader lets out an extremely loud and confident laugh. At that moment he grips the hilt of his powerful sword and begins to pull out the gleaming blade. The leader raises his imposing weapon towards the heavens, demonstrating his complete sovereignty. He points the gleaming blade and proudly proclaims that he himself represents the sky itself. Qian orders that everything be burned, and that definitive control of all the central plains be taken. He makes a swift movement with his sword, ordering his entire army to advance to battle. The subordinates perform the classic martial salute with hands joined, accepting the leader's order. They all shout in unison that they will carry out the supreme command without any hesitation. The warriors quickly disappear in a leap, leaving the leader alone watching from above. The soldiers down there begin to shout and roar excitedly at the imminent combat. The clamor of war fills the entire valley as the troops demonstrate their relentless fury. The gigantic army raises its golden banners before the imposing altar of the celestial demon. Thousands of warriors begin to march in sync, making the earth tremble with their firm steps. The entire horde charges forward, descending the mountains toward the decisive battlefield. Qian proudly watches his unbeatable forces depart, prepared for what lies ahead. Qian lets out a long sigh, trying to relax after watching his entire army leave. He sits heavily in his wooden chair to finally enjoy a moment of rest. The powerful leader brings the small teacup to his lips to take a slow sip. He savors the hot drink, closing his eyes and enjoying the silence atop the fortress. The man smiles, thinking that this feeling of absolute peace is exactly what he needed. Suddenly an animated voice emerges from nowhere, wishing everyone a good day and causing the leader to spit out all his tea. Qian jumps up in fright asking who is there while looking down, intrigued. He comes across a very friendly-looking young man who is smiling calmly at him. Next to the young man is a beautiful girl with dark hair and striking green eyes who stares at him seriously. The mysterious pair stand peacefully in the courtyard, observing the leader of the demonic cult. The great leader immediately recognizes the boy as the same person who lent him the money. Qian's eyes widen in red as he notices an extremely frightening detail. He starts sweating profusely when he realizes he couldn't sense their presence approaching. The three face each other in the distance under the cloudy sky as a strong tension fills the entire place. As the Supreme Master, he possesses such keen senses that he can hear even a leaf falling on the mountains. The young man gives a polite greeting, introducing himself as Manager Kim from the Great Continent's finance company. He smiles slightly and asks if the leader remembers when they met to finalize the loan. The leader remains motionless, finding that attitude too polite for someone who has just invaded his temple. However, the leader's master instinct begins to kick in, warning that the smiling man is dangerous. The warning signal in your mind flashes incessantly, indicating that the visitor is in fact extremely dangerous. The celestial demon asks with a serious and menacing look who the hell he really thinks he is. The boy laughs, saying that he already introduced himself as Manager Kim. While rummaging through his clothes looking for something, he then pulls out from inside his clothes a very simple yellow-covered financial ledger. Manager Kim breaks into a huge smile and reminds the customer that the deadline for payment is today. At that moment, the young woman next to him adjusts her eyeglasses, which gleam in a mysterious and cold way. She reveals herself as the accountant, holding an open book in one hand and a traditional abacus in the other. The girl starts moving the abacus pieces with impressive speed, making a continuous noise. Her fingers move with extreme precision as she meticulously calculates the cult's dead figures. She finally finishes the calculations and stares intently ahead, awaiting the moment to deliver her verdict. Manager Kim hears his accountant whispering and smiles wickedly, leaving the cult leader quite confused. He announces, laughing, that the principal amount is 6,000 Nyang, but the accrued interest already totals 7,000 Nyang. Qian is completely shocked to hear that the total debt has suddenly risen to 13,000 Nyang. He shouts in indignation upon seeing that the interest charged is much more expensive than the amount borrowed itself. The manager mocks him, asking if he was perhaps expecting to receive a charity loan. With a grim look, he says that if the leader wanted low interest rates, he should have gone to a regular bank. The debt collector reminds him that he has the worst possible credit history, in addition to being the leader of a violent cult. Qian becomes enraged upon hearing his cult referred to as a violent faction, and shouts that they are a sacred sect. The young man smiles cynically, saying that to the rest of the world they are nothing more than a bunch of demonic cultists. He says that nobody would risk lending money to a group that could disappear off the face of the earth at any moment. The leader swallows hard and begins to sweat nervously as he realizes that every word the collector says is true. Any creditor who did business with them would be hunted down and destroyed by the other sects in the region. The accountant coldly points with her index finger to one of the clauses written on the original agreement paper. She explains that the risk fee was in the contract, signed in the leader's own handwriting, and stamped with his own stamp. The celestial demon grinds his teeth in utter rage at finding himself cornered by mere tax collectors. Unable to argue against the facts presented, he simply closes his eyes and lets out a sigh of defeat. Qian takes a breath and openly admits that he doesn't have any gold coins with him at the moment. The man then raises his arm and points his index finger towards the horizon, trying to change the focus of the conversation. He asks visitors to look towards the vast fertile lands that stretch out just below them. The leader asks if they can see the immense wealth of the central plains gleaming in the sunlight. The manager says he can see perfectly but complains about the dust, and the leader gets annoyed, saying that wasn't the point. Qian explains that he will raid the Martial Alliance's warehouses and steal much more than his debt. The leader desperately asks for a deadline of just 1 month, promising that the interest will be well worth it in the end. He makes an absurd offer promising to pay up to 3 times the original amount in the name of the original demon. If the conquest of the Central Plains was actually successful, their investment would quickly triple. Manager Kim lets out a wry, ironic smirk, showing that he's not impressed by this in the slightest. He warns that his finance company does not work with future promises and focuses only on current payment capacity. The manager adds that statistically the success rate of a war of conquest is extremely low. The collector begins to take firm steps towards the powerful warrior to resolve the situation by force. He formally rejects the cult leader's proposal, stating that the agreement's time limit has already expired. The boy grins sinisterly and reminds them that the contract stipulates a very specific charge in case of insufficient funds. With a grim look, he warns the client that he will now have to pay that enormous debt with his own body. The celestial demon is completely paralyzed and perplexed upon hearing such a bold threat coming from the debt collector. He starts laughing, finding it an unbelievable absurdity that a mere human would dare to covet the body of the cult's supreme leader. Suddenly, an extremely strong wind begins to blow, waving the flags and changing the atmosphere across the entire summit. The green-eyed accountant is surprised by the sudden change in weather and tries to protect her hair from the wind. She looks around very carefully and realizes that something very dangerous is about to happen on that terrace. An overwhelming energy begins to crack the stone floor and cause the entire structure of the fortress to tremble violently. The sky becomes completely dark and heavy with dense clouds as the leader's spiritual pressure intensifies relentlessly. The young accountant's eyes widen as she feels the immense and overwhelming energy emanating from the enraged celestial demon. The ground beneath Qian's feet begins to crumble completely due to the weight of his hidden power. He channels all his destructive aura, becoming enveloped in a dark and frightening purple energy. He shouts proudly, reaffirming that he is the supreme leader of the demonic cult and the true heaven of the dark path. The warrior angrily asks how a petty moneylender has the audacity to try and lay a hand on him. Qian warns that he intended to finish them off quickly, but now they themselves have chosen the worst death. A gigantic explosion of purple energy consumes the terrace as he prepares to attack the tax collectors. Upon seeing that colossal display of power, Manager Kim sighs and begins to complain about something unexpected. He makes a face of despair and shouts in disbelief, asking what the leader thinks he is doing with his own body. The cult leader thinks he has finally become afraid of combat and asks if he is terrified now. He smiles maliciously, saying that it's too late now and that he won't spare any of their lives from now on. The manager shouts that the leader's body is part of the assets given as collateral and therefore cannot be damaged. Qian interrupts his transformation and makes a face of complete confusion. Not understanding any of that crazy logic, the collector complains that wasting energy like that is a huge waste of a valuable asset of the finance company. The celestial demon is consumed by a blind rage upon seeing that the loan shark only cares about the loan money. He roars with hatred, calling the manager a lunatic, and lunges forward, delivering a deadly attack with his gleaming sword. The leader executes a quick downward cut, but the boy manages to dodge with extreme agility at the last second. The blow strikes the stone floor, creating a devastating shockwave that completely destroys the fortress terrace. He yells that he's going to tear the manager to pieces like trash, and watch his painful death up close. The powerful leader gathers all his might and conjures the terrifying supreme cutting technique of the Black Flame Dragon. He fires a gigantic beam of dark energy towards the collector, tearing through the ground in a terrifying way. Manager Kim watches the enormous burst of power coming toward him without showing the slightest reaction of fear or surprise. He simply crosses his arms calmly and flashes a confident smile, as if everything were under his complete control. The attack narrowly misses the collector and continues advancing at high speed, destroying everything in its path. The colossal blast travels across the horizon and cuts a gigantic mountain in half with extreme ease from a distance. The young, green-eyed accountant is completely speechless in shock as she witnesses the warrior's absurd strength. She can barely process that his attack was capable of slicing through an entire mountain, even though it was deflected. Qian gives a sarcastic laugh, believing he has finally managed to get the situation under control against the cheeky boy. He says he now understands why the manager was so confident, as he had a few cheap tricks up his sleeve. However, the leader assures that this insignificant little trick will only serve to shorten his life even further. He grips the hilt of his sword with both hands, gathering an even more terrifying amount of energy around him. The celestial demon expands its dark aura to the limit, preparing the final blow to pulverize the insolent collector. Qian prepares to unleash another devastating attack, wanting to humiliate his opponent's skills. Manager Kim blocks the blow with extreme ease and sarcastically remarks that the customer talks too much during the fight. The cult leader is completely speechless when he sees that his physical attack was stopped without any difficulty. He is sweating nervously at a fact that absolutely no one in all the Central Plains would believe. The great warrior lets out a sound of surprise as he feels the boy's hand touch directly on his vital energy point. The strongest man in the world had his energy center exposed to a complete unknown force and was unable to react. The cult leader panics when he realizes he has simply lost control of his opponent's rapid movements. The collector flashes a wide, good-humored smile and announces that he is about to begin the process of extracting all of his energy. He gets very close to the warrior's ear and warns with a cold look that the procedure will only hurt a little. Chen's eyes widen in pure terror, sensing that his worst nightmare is about to become a reality. A massive burst of golden light flashes across the terrace as Manager Kim begins to siphon energy from the leader's dantian. The celestial demon screams in pure agony, feeling as if all its internal organs are being ripped out. He desperately realizes that his internal energy is being completely drained by that unknown technique. The golden flow of spiritual power rapidly transfers from the warrior's body to the hands of the relentless collector. The young man calmly asks the client to relax, warning that resisting the process could cause a serious energy imbalance. Chen rages furiously, asking if he has any idea how many years it took to accumulate all that vast power. The manager just smiles and casually tells the man to treat it as if it were a free service. With a frighteningly gentle look, he promises to cleanse even the impurities accumulated in the debtor's body. The once powerful cult master now cries and drools in pain, utterly defeated by the unbearable pain of the extraction. A deafening cry of despair echoes throughout the valley as the debt collection ritual comes to an end. The warrior falls heavily to his knees on the broken ground. Too weak to even hold his own body upright, he lies completely hunched over and exhausted, his breathing weak after losing almost all of his powerful inner energy. The man only murmurs incomprehensible sounds with his head down, unable to believe the humiliation he has suffered. Manager Kim gives a friendly bow, congratulating the customer on their good behavior and declaring the mission accomplished. He bids farewell cheerfully alongside his assistant, introducing himself once again as the debt collectors from the finance company. He leaves a card with the debtor and smiles as he tells him to use the company's services again next time. Chen stares at the business card in his trembling hands with an expression of pure hatred mixed with disbelief. He whispers a few resentful words while gathering what little strength he has left to curse the damned debt collector. The warrior lets out one last furious curse before collapsing and falling backward onto the completely destroyed ground. He lies stretched unconscious on the stone floor, while the small business card floats gently beside him. The fallen business card reveals the financial details of the Grand Continent Company that operates directly in the lands of Murim. The story takes a dramatic pause, revealing the official title of this ruthless debt collector's journey. The scene changes completely, showing a beautiful and traditional Chinese inn under the pleasant light of a new day. Inside the restaurant, several customers chat animatedly while eating and drinking at the wooden tables. Dishes of delicious traditional food and bottles of bamboo wine are served at one of the busiest tables. A man leans across the table and asks his friends if they've heard the latest gossip from the area. He whispers that rumors have surfaced that the terrible army of the demonic cult has simply halted their advance. His drinking buddies are shocked by the revelation, finding it impossible that this unstoppable force could have stopped. Another customer comments that they have been stopped for 3 days and questions whether the legendary Chen might have gotten scared. A more experienced warrior tells him not to talk nonsense, reminding everyone of the leader's fearsome reputation. He recounts that 10 years ago the cult leader single-handedly defeated over 100 masters from the orthodox factions in combat. The man emphasizes that he is a true monster among monsters while the image shows the massacre of the past. Customers continue to debate theories suggesting that the shutdown may be a trap to make them lower their guard. The advance of the cult under the command of the celestial demon seemed totally unstoppable and terrifying to the world. No one could understand why that war march simply stopped out of nowhere without any obstacle in its path. One of the men sitting at the table raises the possibility that the leader may have suffered some kind of sudden energy loss. Another companion dismisses the idea, laughing and finding it highly unlikely that a supreme master would make such a mistake. Everyone in Murim imagined that there was a grand historical conspiracy behind that mysterious parade. One of the customers takes another sip of his drink with a relaxed look and begins to suggest another possibility. He jokes that maybe they just ran out of money for the trip, since moving an army is expensive. A momentary silence falls over the restaurant as the conversation between the friends takes a brief pause. The friends start laughing loudly, finding it funny that the dreaded demonic cult is broke and has no money to fight. The man tries to defend himself by saying it was just a comment, since lack of money affects anyone's life. They keep laughing, unaware that the very debt collectors responsible for that crisis are sitting right nearby. Manager Kim's face cracked slightly as he listened to the conversation, finding the local people's rumors amusing. The young man whispers to his colleague, commenting that the customer is indeed absolutely right in what he just said. Manhwa agrees with him while resting her chin on the restaurant table, showing considerable fatigue. She thoughtfully reflects that money really makes no distinction between humans and demons when it comes to collecting debts. The waiter approaches in a friendly manner, handing over the menu and assuring us that the day's ingredients are fresh. The young woman gets excited remembering that the manager had promised to pay for a huge banquet after that long, tiring trip. The manager crosses his arms and calls her attention in a serious manner, changing the friendly tone of the previous conversation. He points out that the company's funds are not personal money and emphasizes that they received payment only in energy. The young man gives a frighteningly serious look to explain that technically their agency is in the red right now. To save money, he orders 2 bowls of the cheapest pasta on the menu, infuriating his companion with his stinginess. The waiter soon returns bringing the 2 simple portions of cold pasta with cucumber that were ordered. The accountant eats sullenly, wishing the manager's hair would fall out, while he retorts that baldness has nothing to do with it. She ignores the provocation and asks between bites which sucker they're going to visit next. The manager corrects his colleague, asking for respect for the clients, and inquires if she knows where this new debtor usually lives. He breaks into a wide, very grim smile as he thinks about where they should make their next debt collection. With an extremely confident look, the young man reveals that the company's next destination is the famous Manhwa. The story moves to Shaanxi province under the bright light of a full moon illuminating the dark mountains. The streets of the local village are quite busy and full of lit lanterns even though it is late at night. Someone takes a firm step onto the dirt ground, beginning the search for the new client who is behind on payments. Manager Kim and Manhwa walk through a dense, dark forest until they finally reach the correct location. He points to an old building in the middle of the trees and announces that this pavilion will be their office today. Suddenly a firm voice orders them to stop as 2 armed guards emerge from the darkness to block them. One of the guards warns that entry is prohibited and questions what a couple is doing in an isolated place at that time of night. The young accountant finds it very strange to find well-trained guards protecting such an old and dilapidated cabin. She begins to suspect that this humble place hides something far more valuable than it appears at first glance. The manager tries to negotiate politely, but the guard demands the entry token to allow them to enter the pavilion. The boy smiles in a friendly manner and admits that he does not possess any kind of pass or special authorization with him. The guard becomes extremely irritated by the boy's relaxed tone and frowns, preparing to act violently. Without hesitation, the 2 guards draw their sharp swords, demonstrating that they are not there to play around that night. The man threatens, telling them to turn back immediately before the situation turns into a bloodbath. Manager Kim lets out a slight sigh, showing boredom as he realizes he will have to resolve the situation by physical force. He calmly walks forward and comments that the guard's posture reveals that he has taken the lives of other people in the past. The boy flashes a defiant smile and warns that he will need to teach those cheeky guards a lesson. Furious, the guard leaps into the attack, shouting that the young man will only learn respect when he sees his own coffin. He flies through the air under the light of the full moon, delivering a powerful vertical blow with his sword towards the manager. With complete serenity, the boy extends his right hand without making any effort to dodge or draw a weapon. The collector executes an agile movement, dodging the sword cut with frightening and impressive ease. The guard's eyes widen in complete panic as he realizes that his quickest attack completely missed its target. In the blink of an eye, the manager grabs the opponent's bandaged arm, preparing an immediate counter-attack. He brutally throws the guard against the dirt floor, leaving his companion watching the scene in utter shock. The second guard is in despair when he sees his partner defeated so easily by a mere civilian. Screaming with rage, he runs towards the manager, gripping his blade tightly, trying to avenge his fallen friend. He activates a special technique enveloping his weapon in an extremely lethal greenish and poisonous aura. Manager Kim calmly blocks the poisoned blade using only 2 fingers, with a slight smile on his face. With a simple and quick movement, he breaks the metal tip of the guard's sword, leaving him completely defenseless. The guard's mouth agape in utter shock. Unable to comprehend the surreal strength of his opponent, the guard stands paralyzed, staring at his destroyed weapon, unable to comprehend how his lethal attack failed so badly. Suddenly, several beams of blue light strike the vital points of his body, blocking his power flow. He screams in pain as he feels his meridians being hit by the boy's secret and extremely fast technique. The second guard collapses heavily to the ground, while the manager simply continues walking without looking back. Manhwa observes the entire scene in absolute silence, impressed by her boss's composure and skill. She silently reflects that even having seen many martial arts in her clan, she cannot decipher his style. The young woman notes that the manager's techniques belong neither to orthodox sects nor to unorthodox factions. Furthermore, she recalls that not long ago he single-handedly raided the fearsome demonic cult to confront its leader. She thinks that a master of that level should be legendary in Murim, and that it would be impossible for her to have never heard of him. The accountant wonders what the manager's true, secret identity might be, and whether she should question him directly. She focuses her bright, expressive eyes on his thoughtful figure, pondering the mystery surrounding his past. Soon after, she abandons the idea, knowing that he probably wouldn't answer her questions anyway. She recalls that he never revealed anything about his personal life as the manager turns around to face her. The young man stands still under the soft moonlight, watching his assistant walk thoughtfully behind him. The defeated guard groans in pain on the dirt floor, clutching his injured arm and crying out in excruciating pain. The other guard also suffers from the side effects of the technique that relentlessly sealed his meridians. The 2 men lie fallen and immobilized in the courtyard while the pair of collectors advance towards the pavilion. She asks if they died, but the manager explains that he only sealed their powers so they wouldn't hurt anyone else. The boy orders the accountant to drag the bodies to a hidden corner, leaving the young woman completely outraged. He opens the door quietly while she drags the heavy guard, complaining about her boss's lack of consideration. Manager Kim enters the dark cabin, illuminated only by the bluish light coming from the night outside. He examines the interior of the silent place, making a thoughtful sound as he searches for any clue about the debtor. The boy quickly locates a secret passage with a wooden staircase that leads directly to the basement. The dark staircase descends towards the depths of the pavilion, revealing a mysterious and dimly lit path. He begins to descend the stone steps calmly while listening to the echo of lively conversations coming from below. The sound of loud voices and laughter grows clearer as he approaches the end of the underground corridor. The manager lets out a sound of satisfaction upon realizing that he has finally found the whereabouts of the client he was looking for. He arrives at a huge underground hall filled with betting tables and many men gambling enthusiastically. The secret room functions as a vibrant illegal gambling house hidden beneath the old structure of the forest cabin. One of the bettors excitedly slams his hand on the table, stating that the result will be even and even betting his own hand on the round. At another table, the men are arguing fiercely about the losses, complaining about one of their teammates' terrible play. Manhwa finally manages to reach the boss in the underground hall, and the manager notices the arrival of his assistant. She complains that he ran too fast, but the manager jokes that she should have helped him with the guards. The young woman watches the bets in shock and questions whether their workplace today is really that illegal gambling house. The boy confirms with a huge, friendly smile on his face, showing that he is very pleased with the discovery. She complains about the stuffy air and bad smell of the place, while the manager jokes that the smell of money is indeed strong. Suddenly, a loud celebration coming from one of the tables catches their attention, making the young woman look startled. The men shout in amazement at the incredible winning streak achieved by a young player. The manager discreetly points to the prominent table and informs his companion that he has finally found the client. The debtor is an elegant young man dressed in black and red who holds his gambling pieces with a snobbish expression. On the sleeve of his dark robes is a very clear purple coat of arms in the characteristic shape of a plum blossom. Manhwa immediately recognizes the flower symbol and turns pale with nervousness as she wonders who that player could be. She is shocked to realize that the debtor this time is actually an important disciple of the renowned Manhwa sect. The young man smiles mysteriously and takes the opportunity to lecture his assistant on good manners. He calmly repeats that she should not refer to debtors as suckers, but rather treat them as valuable clients. The target is Cheongsang, the direct disciple of the sect leader, and the youngest plum blossom swordsman in history, the name of that young warrior used to shake the entire region of Murim, because of his formidable talent with the sword. But the manager looks at his drawing and reveals with a smile that the boy's gaming skills are terrible. She finds his contradiction unbelievable, while the manager asks her not to distort his words regarding the charge. The accountant looks at the contract paper, intrigued, and questions whether the information about his losses is reliable. Manhwa observes the table intently and notices that the boy's win rate so far seems very strange. Cheongsang becomes quite tense and sweaty as he carefully examines the game pieces in his hands. The young man from Manhwa breaks into a huge, confident smile and decides to raise the stakes by 10 silver coins at once. The opponent asks him to reveal his pieces, and the young man swallows hard, feeling a sharp pang of nervousness. The boy throws his pieces onto the game table with a snapping sound, revealing his winning combination to everyone. His companions celebrate joyfully, shouting as they see that the young brother from the cult managed to win the round. Cheongsang laughs loudly, celebrating yet another consecutive victory while collecting all the coins from the gaming table. The manager watches the young man celebrate and comments quietly to his colleague that the boy has won another game. The accountant observes that he seems very awkward and stiff and wonders if he's just having a lot of luck today. Manager Kim smiles mysteriously, thinking it would be great if the boy decided to stop gambling while he's winning. He turns to her and asks if she knows what the scariest thing that can happen at a betting table is. The other players praise the boy, saying he's playing incredibly today, and that he'll bankrupt the entire house if he keeps it up. The young man from Manhwa smiles smugly and boasts that the pieces seem to be coming together in his hands today. The manager reflects that the real danger begins precisely when the player starts winning matches by sheer luck. Manhwa is quite intrigued by her boss's enigmatic comment and focuses her attention back on the table. The manager's words seem like a curse, as the rhythm of the game, which seemed perfect, suddenly begins to change. The boy's opponent grins maliciously as he reveals his pieces and celebrates that he has finally won that round. Cheongsang becomes quite frustrated when he realizes he lost the entire match by just one single point difference. The young man tries to disguise his nervousness by laughing and saying that it's normal to lose sometimes since the amount wagered was small. The croupier at the table narrows his eyes in a rather shrewd and cold manner as he prepares for the next round of bets. At first he let the boy win the small rounds, but soon the young man started losing the big bets by a small margin. Cheongsang gets very excited when he sees an excellent combination in his hands, believing he will recover everything now. However, the opponent reveals his coins with a smile and announces that his score ended up being higher by only 1 point. Desperate, the boy throws his pieces on the table with great force, trying to challenge his opponent in every way possible. The opponent calmly reveals their pieces and celebrates with relief that their hand ended up being slightly superior. The man laughs and says mockingly that he even feels bad for winning so many times in a row by just 1 point. Cheongsang grips the pieces so tightly that his veins bulge as he listens to his opponent celebrate his good fortune. Losing repeatedly by just a single point completely destroys the boy's reasoning ability. His companions try to convince him to leave, saying that today is not his day and that it is getting very late. Consumed by addiction and anger, he ignores his friends and rummages through his clothes looking for more money to gamble. He pulls from his clothes an immense and heavy rope full of shiny silver coins that represent his fortune. The young man puts all his remaining money on the table, frightening his companions with that extreme and risky action. Everyone around is speechless when they realize that the young man has decided to gamble away absolutely all of his possessions at once. With a completely crazed look, he states with great certainty that his own instinct guarantees victory this time. His friends stand silently watching with concern as they see the young man completely blinded by his gambling obsession. Not wanting to get involved in the loss, his companions make up an urgent excuse and leave, leaving their friend alone. Sang remains seated alone at his betting table under the watchful and observant gaze of the manager and his colleague. Manager Kim decides that the time has finally come and gets up from his chair, preparing to do his job. He straightens his clothes and asks the assistant with a smile if they should start working now. The gigantic pile of silver coins stacked on the betting table represents the young warrior's ultimate fate. He claps his hands on his last great fortune, willing to risk everything he has in a desperate gamble. Viewers at the betting site comment in horror that the boy from Manhwa has put his entire inheritance at risk. Through clenched teeth and cold sweat, he repeats to himself that he is absolutely certain of success in that round. His friends watch the scene from a distance, knowing that trying to stop the boy in that state of madness would be futile. A tense silence fills the entire underground hall as everyone awaits the outcome of the boy's final bet. Manager Kim decides he has watched enough and rises from his desk with a very calm and determined posture. He calmly walks towards the debtor, calling his assistant to begin the collection process. Outside the pavilion, the full moon continues to shine in the cloudy sky, illuminating the peaceful mountain scenery. But the young man from Manhwa pulls at his own hair in utter despair as he realizes he has just lost everything. He collapses, sitting outside the betting shop, clutching his head and silently weeping over his utter ruin. The boy from Manhwa curses himself angrily, calling himself crazy for having lost all his money. He clutches his head in panic, remembering that his master will give him a terrible beating when he finds out everything. Suddenly the warrior is startled to feel a mysterious presence and notice a large shadow approaching him. Manager Kim appears under the moonlight, offering a quick and friendly loan to the desperate young man. He flashes a wide smile and says they don't require any guarantee to release the money on the same day. The young man introduces himself as the manager of the Grand Continent Finance Company, ready to help anyone who needs funds. Sang is speechless with utter shock upon hearing that bizarre proposal amidst his despair. The young man from Manhwa asks, quite confused, what the boy means by that financial story. He becomes suspicious of the easy money offer without guarantees and begins to suspect the pair's true intentions. The warrior faces the two visitors and directly questions whether they are dangerous loan sharks charging high interest rates. Manager Kim calmly explains that people can call him whatever they want, but his focus is solely on helping those in need. Sang becomes enraged and draws his sharp sword, glaring at the two debt collectors in an extremely aggressive manner. He says it's an insult to offer money to a plum blossom swordsman and warns that they will die. The manager tries to calm things down by laughing and fidgeting with his clothes to clear up the misunderstanding. He pulls from his robes that huge, gleaming string of silver coins that the young man had so coveted on the table. The swordsman's eyes widened in complete shock as he saw that mountain of silver coins gleaming before him. Kim jingles the money and warns that the boy's status as a plum blossom warrior doesn't matter to him. He asks with a smile if that isn't what he's looking for and encourages him to take the money to recoup his losses. Sang stares at the money in a mesmerized way and begins to sweat profusely under the irresistible temptation to gamble more. He is very surprised to realize that the manager doesn't really care about his influence in the Manhwa sect. The warrior bites his lips hard, intensely desiring to lay his hands on that enormous golden fortune. He admits to himself in despair that he would do anything to have that money and gamble it all again. Manager Kim then hands over an official contract document with the loan rules detailed. He flashes a huge, friendly smile and assures that the process is simple. Just sign to get the money instantly. The young man puts his sword back in its sheath and decides to listen carefully to the debt collector's tempting offer. The boy accepts the paper and takes the paintbrush from the manager's hands without hesitating for another second before signing. The warrior from Manhwa quickly signs the end of the contract, confirming the loan terms. He hands the signed document back to the manager and asks to receive the promised money as soon as possible. Driven by blind madness, he grins maniacally, demanding that the boy hand over the enormous rope of coins. Manager Kim politely collects the document, congratulating the new client on their excellent and quick choice. The young man grabs the money and runs desperately back inside the inn, leaving the contract on the floor. Makriwa is startled to see the boy run off frantically without even looking back after grabbing the coins. The accountant bends down to pick up the signed paper that was left forgotten on the damp grass of the secret garden. She walks alongside her boss and questions why a mere disciple was accepted as their client. The young woman reflects that gambling is bad, But the boy didn't do anything cruel, like the terrible leader of the demonic cult from the past. The manager asks if she thinks he chooses his clients based on their orthodox or demonic factions. He closes his eyes calmly and states that for him, faction doesn't matter because they are all just martial artists. The young man explains with a smile that the only important thing is to know if the debtor possesses what his company needs. The assistant listens to the answer in absolute silence, holding the signed document as they walk under the full moon. She makes a face of distrust, looking at her boss with disdain as she realizes the boundless ambition of Murim's loan shark. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approach the pair of collectors, drawing their attention in the middle of the dark courtyard. One of the guards they previously defeated reappears, injured and furious, seeking revenge against the pair. The man recalls the terrible humiliation he suffered when the manager sealed his meridians with a simple physical touch. The wounded guard is supported by his gang members who arrive with a hostile and defiant expression. He remembers the unbearable pain of having his energy violently blocked by the boy's mysterious techniques. He brings an army of henchmen led by a muscular, bald man with a distinctive scar over his left eye. The bald leader stares intimidatingly at the collectors, and the wounded guard confirms that they are the culprits. The manager complains that she should have hidden the men better, and she retorts that he should have had them buried. The big guy introduces himself as the leader of the Viper gang and demands that the two reveal their names and affiliations now. The young man smiles and introduces himself as Manager Kim from the finance company, while she mentally jokes about her rival's funny name. The gang leader scoffs at the name of the finance company, stating that he has never heard of that company in his life. He calls the young man an insolent brat and warns him that he should be more careful when trespassing on his gang's territory. Manager Kim simply maintains his usual calm smile and replies that he doesn't care one bit about that gang. The big, bald man's eyes trembled with rage when he saw that the boy showed no sign of fear in his presence. He orders his men to cut off an arm and a leg from each of the invaders without killing them, so as not to spoil the deal. The henchmen accept the boss's order, shouting, and charge towards the pair of debt collectors in the garden. One of the warriors leaps up wielding a large sword and shouts furiously, attempting to strike the unarmed manager. With an extremely subtle movement, the boy dodges and strikes his opponent's leg with a precise and quick kick. The impact of the manager's blow instantly breaks the henchman's joint, making a cracking sound in the process. The gang member screams desperately as he feels the unbearable pain of having his leg fractured in a second. He collapses to the dirt floor as his sword flies away, clearing the way for the next attack. Another henchman runs angrily towards the boy, cursing and delivering a violent side slash with his sharp weapon. Manager Kim executes a perfect sideways dodge, letting the blade graze past him without touching him. He keeps his eyes closed and a serene expression on his face, showing that fighting those thugs is far too easy. Then he delivers a powerful palm strike charged with blue energy to the opponent's chest, sending him flying. The henchman is brutally thrown against the trees, falling completely unconscious to the forest floor. All the gang's henchmen now groan in pain, lying on the lawn, while the leader watches his men's defeat. The bald man is paralyzed with shock upon hearing the laments of his warriors who were defeated in a matter of seconds. His eyes trembled with terror as he realized that the man before him possessed a strength that defied all common logic. The silent garden of the pavilion is now filled with unconscious bodies thrown under the soft light of the full moon. The gang leader wonders in disbelief how a single person was able to take down so many men in an instant. A red, demonic silhouette appears in the bald man's mind, representing the absolute danger that this boy poses. He begins to wonder, with great fear, if that friendly debt collector is actually a monster disguised as a human. The big guy swallows hard, feeling the cold sweat trickle down his face as his confidence completely vanishes. He tries to maintain a tough guy pose and praises the young man's performance, pretending that he is still in control of the situation. The bald man suggests that he might forgive the boy if he decides to kneel and offer a sincere apology right then and there. However, his eyes widen when he realizes that the manager didn't give a damn about his empty threats. The boy lets out a tired sigh and begins to walk slowly towards the big guy to end that dispute. In a fraction of a second, the bald man is struck by a devastating punch that violently throws him high into the air. The gang leader spits blood and screams in pain as he suffers the terrible damage from that single, destructive blow from the manager. He collapses unconscious on the floor while the boy calmly straightens his clothes acting as if nothing had happened. The remaining henchmen beg for their lives, calling the young man a monster and fleeing in desperation. The manager merely smiles slightly, observing the desperate escape of the bandits who cry out in terror at his strength. He warns the losers that he will spare them today, but assures them that things will get bad if they reopen that betting shop. The big, bald man trembles with terror, lying on the wet ground, too weak to even respond to the young collector's warning. The young man turns to his partner and kindly informs her that it is now her turn to do her job. She makes a bored face when she realizes that the boss wants her to clean up all that mess and organize the yard by herself. The young woman complains, cursing the manager and calling him an exploitative boss, while he simply continues walking ahead. The boy looks back with a calm and thoughtful expression, completely ignoring his assistant's complaints. He observes the beautiful full moon and comments that he is quite curious to know if their client managed to make money. Inside the betting shop, a large crowd tensely watches the gaming table where the young man from Manhwa is placing bets. Chiang-sang stares at his pieces through clenched teeth, sweating profusely, sensing that the game's situation is desperate. He slams his hands on the table in anger, shouting that it's impossible he lost 5 rounds in a row by just 1 point. The boy accuses his opponents of cheating and manipulating the game results to steal all his money. The croupier at the table just laughs cynically and mockingly comments that the young swordsman is just unlucky at gambling. He taunts the boy, saying it would be a disgrace to the great Manhwa sect to see a disciple throw a tantrum over losing. Everyone around starts laughing at the humiliation of the young swordsman, who is completely devastated by the people's jokes. Night falls silently outside the pavilion as the full moon illuminates the dark mountaintops. Suddenly, the door of the cabin is violently opened by the young man from Manhwa, who runs out in a fit of rage. Manager Kim is waiting for him outside with a big, friendly smile and asks if he's finished playing for the day. Chiang-sang runs out desperately and smiles with relief when he realizes that the 2 debt collectors are still outside. He desperately begs for more silver coins and Manager Kim asks in surprise if he wants another share of the money. The young man swears that this time he will win everything back and asks for just one more chance to pay off his entire debt to them. The young man says that with his credit it is possible to get the loan, but explains that he will need some collateral. Chiang-sang rummages through his clothes searching for something of value, and suddenly finds a special jewel he carries with him. He displays a sacred jade plaque from Mount Hu, given by his own master as collateral for the new loan. Completely blinded by his gambling addiction, he hands over his most sacred treasure without thinking about the terrible consequences. Manager Kim accepts the jade plaque with satisfaction and hands the customer another heavy string of silver coins. The young man from Manhwa runs at full speed back to the betting parlor wanting to recover his lost money. In the following 2 hours, that same humiliating situation of loss and borrowing repeats itself like a broken record. Hurried footsteps descend the underground stairs of the inn, with the boy repeatedly running after more funds. He reappears at the pavilion door completely insane, shouting and begging the manager to lend him more. The young man shouts that he swears by the name of his entire sacred sect that he will win the round and pay back enormous interest. Manager Kim smiles warmly and calmly asks the customer to relax, stating that they trust in his potential. The 3rd loan is granted, but the young swordsman's luck remains terrible, and he soon loses everything again. Chiang-sang mutters curses and low insults with trembling hands as he watches his financial ruin. The 4th loan of silver coins is carried out mechanically, with the boy sinking even further into debt. The 5th and final loan is delivered in the garden under the watchful and silent gaze of Makriwa, who observes his madness. The boy's opponent slams his fist on the betting table, announcing the result of the last and decisive round of the game. Chiang-sang collapses onto the table, completely broken, upon realizing he has lost absolutely everything he owned that night. A deafening scream of despair and agony echoes from his throat as he realizes the extent of the damage he has accumulated. The lament of suffering travels through the valley under the cold moonlight, frightening the few forest creatures around it. Outside, Manager Kim decides that's enough for today, and that their work shift is over. He calls his assistant to leave, but she stops, startled, upon hearing the terrible scream of despair coming from inside. She asks worriedly if they shouldn't collect the debt, since the boy clearly lost everything he borrowed. The manager yawns lazily, commenting that money debts are like soy sauce and get better with time. The young accountant questions what they will do if the boy decides to lie in the future, or claims he has no way to pay. The boy replies that this would be the best possible situation. Leaving his assistant completely confused by the logic, he flashes a terrifyingly macabre smile, explaining that this way he can cut open the debtor's stomach as punishment. The story moves forward to the next day, showcasing the beautiful and imposing traditional buildings of the Manhwa sect. The sun's rays illuminate the silent wooden corridors of the sacred temple, which appears completely calm in the morning. The camera focuses on the closed doors of one of the sleeping quarters in the elite disciples' quarters of the Manhwa sect. Inside the room, the young man from Manhwa is sitting on his bed, clutching his head in a state of utter despair. He trembles with nervousness and sobs with regret as he remembers all the madness and irresponsibility he committed last night. The boy curses himself incessantly, pulling his own hair forcefully as he tries to find a way out of the crisis. He desperately questions how he could have lost his temper so ridiculously at a simple gaming table. He recalls with horror that he not only borrowed money, but did it all in the name of his respected and long-standing sect. To make matters worse, the boy remembers that he handed over the master's sacred jade tablet as collateral to the mysterious loan shark. The young man curls up in bed crying and trembling with fear as he imagines his superior's reaction when they find out everything. He knows that being expelled will be the least of his problems, since his master will surely take his life as punishment. Suddenly, firm knocks on the wooden door startle the boy, who jumps in terror, believing it to be his trial. A junior disciple warns from outside that the sect's big leader is summoning the boy to an urgent meeting. Cheongsang turns completely pale and his eyes widen as he realizes his worst nightmare has just begun. He murmurs his master's title in a voice trembling with fear, knowing that he will have to face him face to face right now. The camera focuses on the magnificent temple of Manhwa as the young man prepares to walk towards his final destination. In the main hall, the sect leader waits standing while the boy kneels respectfully on the cold wooden floor. The respected leader of the Hyeonjong sect observes his disciple with a deep, serious gaze filled with wisdom. The young man replies with a trembling voice of panic, trying to appear calm in the imposing presence of his master. The master calls his attention to the fact that he missed the morning training and asks if he has been getting lazy lately. He apologizes, feigning illness, while desperately thinking that all he can worry about is his large debts. Hyeonjong laments that such a talented swordsman from Manhwa can't even take care of his own physical health. He extends his arm forward and throws a small wooden object directly towards his disciple. A decorated box falls to the wooden floor with a cracking sound as the frightened young man stares at it, confused. Cheongsang's eyes widened and he broke out in a cold sweat as he noticed the unexpected gift thrown before him. He focuses his gaze on a small black box adorned with a beautiful golden plum blossom symbol of the sect. The young man smells a mild and very refined medicinal aroma emanating directly from that small, mysterious box. The master warns that this is the plum blossom pill and orders him to eat it to regain his strength. Cheongsang is stunned with surprise when he realizes that his master has given him such a valuable spiritual pill. With trembling hands, he carefully opens the small box and looks at the glittering treasure kept inside. A round, shiny purple pill is positioned on a luxurious red silk cushion. The young man recognizes the treasure that any martial artist in the world would give their life to possess. He swallows hard, feeling immense guilt for receiving such a valuable prize after playing all night. The disciple bows deeply, thanking his master with a voice choked with shame for what he has done. The master displays a peaceful and understanding smile, demonstrating all his paternal affection for his young apprentice. He says the future of the sect depends on him, and orders the young man to leave immediately to rest and recover. Cheongsang's eyes fill with tears as he witnesses such kindness and consideration from his master. A wave of genuine emotion washes over the young man's heart as he perceives the warm concern of his mentor, and he immediately thinks that if he sells that spiritual pill, he can recover the jade tablet given as collateral. The boy sits in the outer courtyard of the large temple with the small box in his hands, his expression thoughtful and distressed. Cheongsang mentally curses himself, calling himself a monster for calculating the value of the gift before feeling gratitude. Suddenly, the sound of whispers and distant conversations catches the boy's attention, and he looks intrigued at the gate. He observes the entrance gate of the temple, where several local villagers are gathered conversing. An elderly lady holds the hands of one of the disciples, humbly asking for the sacred blessings of the sect. The young warrior gently asks her to stand up and promises to pray with all his heart for her family. Ordinary people travel from afar to seek help from Manhwa, demonstrating a blind and beautiful trust in the Taoists. The residents bring fresh fruit and rice cakes as a heartfelt thank you for the protection given by the sect. Qiangsang observes that pure and noble scene from a distance, feeling the weight of his guilt increase even more. The peaceful scenery of Mount Hua contrasts sharply with the sinful thoughts of the young man biting his lip. The boy remains seated leaning against the wall, his gaze completely lost and sad, unsure of what to do now. He grinds his teeth angrily, cursing himself for getting himself into such a complicated and terrible situation. The warrior gets up abruptly from the ground, determined to take drastic action to solve his problem quickly. He focuses his gaze on the small black medicine box and accepts that he will have to make that sacrifice for his own good. The boy keeps the precious item inside his clothes, convincing himself that this is an unavoidable choice today. Qiangsang stands up and decides he will sell the spirit pill at a pawn shop to get the ransom. He considers that losing the pill is less serious than losing forever the sacred tablet that his master entrusted to him. The young man plans to settle his debt first, then train until he dies and enrich his beloved sect again. He fixes his gaze with extreme determination, focused on his new and risky escape mission that night. The boy runs down the temple corridor swearing to himself that he will never again go near a gambling table. Dark night falls over Mount Hua under the bright light of a full moon illuminating the traditional rooftops. Quick, silent footsteps echo through the courtyard as the young swordsman begins his secret escape from the temple. With an impressive leap, the boy clears the high wall of the fortress, without making a sound so as not to be caught. He glides gracefully through the air under the bright moonlight, crossing the temple boundaries with extreme physical skill. The warrior lands gently on the grass outside the wall and quickly prepares to continue his journey. He stands up with a rather serious and tense expression, focused on quickly reaching his final destination in the city. The boy closes his eyes and mentally apologizes to his master before starting to run through the dark forest. He walks quickly through the dense trees of the mountain, trying to get as far away from the temple as possible. Suddenly a familiar voice calls his name in the darkness, startling the boy terribly on his way. Qiangsang looks back in terror and comes face to face with the figure of one of his older brothers from the sect on the shortcut. The veteran disciple flashes a friendly smile and asks where the young man plans to go at such a late hour of the night. The boy becomes desperate when he realizes that the night guard on duty today is none other than his senior brother. Qiangsang thanks his senior brother Qiangyam, who is known for being extremely strict within the sect. Qiangyam dismisses the trivialities and asks, with a smile, where the boy is going in the middle of the night. The young man tries to make up a story that he only went out to get some fresh air, but the veteran immediately becomes suspicious of the excuse. He questions whether anyone would actually jump over the sect's wall in the middle of the night, just to take a peaceful stroll. Qiangsang starts sweating nervously as he realizes he gave the worst possible excuse for that suspicious situation. The veteran notices the boy's strange posture, who keeps his hand firmly pressed against his own chest. He narrows his eyes, focusing all his attention on that arm that seems to hide something precious in his clothes. The young man tries to disguise his tension, while tightly gripping the fabric to protect the box hidden there. Qiangyam asks directly what he is hiding in his chest and orders him to show the object without further ado. Without giving him time to react, the senior steps forward and pulls the decorated box from the frightened boy's clothing. He opens the lid and is very surprised to recognize that it is the legendary plum blossom pill. The pill shines intensely, reflecting the enormous spiritual power contained within that small vial. The veteran asks where he got that, and Qiangsang stammers, saying it was a gift from his master. Qiangyam is shocked to hear that the sect leader himself has given such a rare treasure to his disciple. Suddenly the senior's rigid expression transforms into a huge, radiant smile of pure happiness. He returns the box praising the master's insight for finally recognizing the young man's great talent. But he soon questions why he's carrying the medication around in the middle of the night. And the boy panics completely. He lies, saying he was embarrassed by his colleague's stares, and therefore decided to take the medicine alone. The veteran begins to shed tears of emotion, leaving the debtor completely shocked by his reaction. The senior apologizes for doubting such a noble heart, and Qiangsang accepts, laughing awkwardly at the situation. To make matters worse, the veteran decides to act as a guard and orders him to consume the pill right there, and then Cheongsang stammers in horror, asking if he really wants him to do this in the middle of the dark forest. Kyongyeom confirms with a smile and explains that the effect is immediate, so he needs to monitor the boy's energy. The veteran immediately sits down on the dirt floor, preparing to begin the training vigil. He gestures excitedly for the boy to sit down while Cheongsang wonders why the old man is so cheerful. The young man appreciates the kindness, but argues that he is very used to training in complete isolation. The senior shouts angrily, warning that the medicine's energy is too strong, and any mistake could cause death. He orders the boy to start the process immediately, while the debtor realizes that his plan is going very wrong. The young man makes up various excuses about aches and pains, but the senior always offers an immediate solution. An awkward silence settles between the two in the forest under the veteran's firm and watchful gaze. Cheongsang trembles in despair as he realizes he has no way out of that situation. With trembling hands, he finally opens the lid of the small box, revealing the purple glow of the sacred pill. He holds the medicine while the senior positions himself right behind him, preparing his hands to guide the flow. The young man stares at the treasure that was supposed to save his financial life and realizes that his fate is sealed there. With no other choice, he slowly opens his mouth and brings the precious pill closer, swallowing it against his will. The boy swallows the sacred medicine, feeling all his last hope of paying off the loan sharks vanish instantly. An immense wave of blue energy begins to emanate from the young man's body, illuminating the entire dark clearing in the forest. He clasps his hands together to channel the flow as the spiritual force surges overwhelmingly through his body. The young man meditates intently while the power of the pill spreads, restoring and strengthening all his energy channels. The senior is impressed and comments that his energy has suddenly become incredibly clean and powerful. He pats the boy on the back, congratulating him and saying that the master's judgment was impeccable. Cheongsang gets up from the ground without saying a single word, leaving the veteran seated, observing his posture. He joins his fists in a traditional gesture of respect to end the situation as quickly as possible. The young man thanks the veteran for his help, stating that he can now dedicate himself even more to the sect's training. He flashes a forced smile and shouts that everything that happened there is thanks to the great generosity of his senior brother. Moments later he collapses, lying under the light of the full moon, his gaze completely blank and without the strength to react. He stares at the dark sky, realizing his life is over and there's no chance of resolving his predicament. The medicine is working on his stomach, but he can only lament that he can no longer sell it for profit. The boy laments that without resources, the debt collectors will soon reveal all his shameful secrets to the sect. He realizes that there is no escape now and that his permanent expulsion from Manhwa is only a matter of time. Cheongsang grimaces thoughtfully as he desperately tries to find a way to get rid of that enormous debt. Suddenly the boy's eyes widened as an extremely dark and dangerous idea crossed his mind. He gives a wicked grin, realizing there's a much simpler way to solve his problem. The young man crouches on the dark forest floor, focused on putting his terrible assassination plan into action. He coldly reflects that debts only exist if there is a living creditor to collect them, and draws his sharp sword. The warrior grins sadistically as he concludes that everything will be resolved if the loan sharks disappear from the map for good. The boy decides he can eliminate the debt collectors silently, and without anyone knowing about his malicious act. Thanks to the beneficial effects of the mystic pill, he feels his inner energy overflowing like never before. The swordsman grips his weapon tightly and wonders why he should pay the debt when he can simply kill them. He opens with a completely psychopathic and insane look, consumed by the desire to murder the collectors of his debt. The scene advances, showing the silent facade of the inn under the pale light of the full moon in the middle of that cold night. Someone takes a firm step on the stone floor, approaching the entrance of the inn where their targets are staying. Cheongsang arrives at the scene with a serious and determined expression, ready to execute his dark plan of elimination. He focuses his gaze on the entrance of the inn, confirming that he has finally located the correct whereabouts of his creditors. The young swordsman observes the large wooden structure attentively, preparing to silently infiltrate the place. He recalls the manager's words informing him that they would be staying in room number 5 of that inn. The boy keeps his gaze half closed and focused, concentrating all his murderous intent on the fight to come. He pushes open the wooden door silently and enters the inn, illuminated only by a sliver of yellow light. The inn's interior corridor is completely empty and silent, with lit lanterns hanging from the high ceiling. The swordsman walks slowly and stealthily across the wooden floor so as not to alert the sleeping guests. He repeats to himself that the answer is simple, and that the debt will disappear as soon as the debt collector ceases to exist. The boy plans to finish the job cleanly to retrieve his jade tablet, and forget that all of this happened. He finally stops in front of a decorated wooden door that indicates the room where his targets are that night. The camera focuses on the sign indicating the room number written in dark letters, confirming that it is the correct location. The young warrior stands before room number 5, breathing deeply and preparing his surprise attack. He presses his ear to the door and listens intently, trying to identify any movement or conversation inside. The boy immediately recognizes the low voices of a man and a woman coming directly from inside that room. He is absolutely certain that these are the 2 loan sharks from the finance company and decides that now is the ideal time to act. With firm and determined hands, the boy grips the hilt of his sword and prepares to deliver an immediate, fatal blow. The swordsman channels a strong pink energy around his body, focused on destroying the room with a single powerful attack. With his eyes glowing an insane shade of pink, he silently apologizes but warns that they will die together today. In the blink of an eye, he kicks the door open and bursts into the room, delivering a devastating sword blow that shatters everything. The destructive impact of the attack breaks the wooden floor, generating a huge explosion of dust and debris into the air. He conjures the secret technique of his sect, unleashing the powerful 7th movement of the Plum Blossom Sword art. A colossal beam of pink light in the shape of a cross tears through the darkness of the room, consuming all the space around them. The powerful technique causes petals of light to spread through the air, while the blow completely destroys the walls of the room. The inn's ceiling and furniture shatter violently under the overwhelming force of the energy generated by the swordsman. The roof of the building simply explodes, sending shards of wood into the sky as the roar echoes through the village. Cheongsang remains motionless as dust and petals of energy slowly fall upon the destroyed structure. He observes the wreckage of the room, now completely open to the night sky due to the devastating power of the impact. The young man sighs in relief, thinking that the problem is finally over and that he has managed to get rid of all that despair. He feels no regret or guilt for the drastic action, but rather enormous relief at having resolved his situation. The boy feels as if a hand that was squeezing his throat has disappeared, allowing him to breathe calmly again. Suddenly, frightened screams from people on the floor below, who heard the large explosion, begin to echo through the inn. In a hurry, the young man begins to sift through the destroyed pieces of wood, desperately searching for his jade tablet. He searches the ruins of the room with great agility, looking in all directions before anyone appears in the chamber. He focuses his attentive gaze on every corner of the broken floor, trying to find the characteristic gleam of his treasure. The boy lets out a triumphant exclamation as he finally spots the gleaming jade object amidst the wooden rubble. The sacred jade tablet is intact and gleaming beneath the broken beams, exactly where the boy expected it to be. The warrior quickly retrieves his sacred amulet and runs at high speed to escape from that destroyed inn. The boy leaps high under the light of the full moon, successfully escaping the inn he just destroyed. He lands on the stone ground and sprints through the silent streets of the village, wanting to get away from there quickly. The swordsman continues running at high speed, taking advantage of the silence of the night to avoid drawing attention. He focuses his gaze on the darkness as he runs tirelessly, feeling the icy wind hit his face. The young man from Manhwa begins to pant heavily due to the intense physical exertion of his hurried escape through the forest. He tries to catch his breath but keeps running without stopping, knowing he can't waste any time in that dark night. The boy grips his sacred jade amulet tightly and smiles with pure madness and relief at the success of the plan. He celebrates with relief, thinking that the terrible nightmare is finally over and that he has managed to escape all danger. The young man feels immense joy at having recovered his greatest treasure and believes that things have returned to their proper place. However, overcome by that happiness, the boy makes a silly and careless mistake that he would never normally make. Instead of using the discreet and dark shortcuts, he runs directly through the center of the village's busy main avenue. The boy sprints down the brightly lit road, unaware that someone is watching his every move from above. A mysterious and imposing figure stands atop the roof, watching the swordsman's hasty escape from afar. The observer reveals himself to be the respected elder Master Yahello of the sect, who stares at the young man with a serious and worried expression. The scene advances, showing once again the grand and traditional wooden structure of the sacred temples of the Manhwa sect. The young swordsman fondly admires the mystical glow of the jade tablet, now safe and sound back in his hands. Sitting on his bed, he holds the amulet with relief, believing he has managed to save his reputation in the eyes of the entire sect. He smiles, thinking that now he just needs to forget all the events of that tense day and focus on his life as a Taoist. However, the young man jumps in fright when he hears loud knocking on the wooden door of his room in the dormitory. Qiangsang turns pale with nervousness as he immediately recognizes the deep voice of Elder Yahello calling his name. The master slowly opens the sliding door, revealing his intimidating presence under the dim light that enters through the opening. The elder stares coldly at the disciple, and the boy tries to disguise his panic by inventing that he was sleepless due to training. The experienced elder observes the young man's anxious behavior, suspecting that something is very wrong with his disciple. The master maintains a closed expression, demonstrating that he does not believe the weak excuse he has just heard. He enters the silent room with calm, heavy steps as the atmosphere inside grows increasingly tense. The master reports that he has heard of a great commotion in the village, and that an entire inn was destroyed in the middle of the night. He firmly adds that the attack was carried out using the sacred cutting techniques of the Plum Blossom sect. The young man feels his heart race with terror, and his eyes tremble as he realizes that the master already knows the whole truth about the crime. The elder curtly orders the boy to show his hands, and the disciple tries to postpone his punishment by feigning misunderstanding. The master explains seriously that using a sword violently always leaves visible marks that are difficult to erase. Qiangsang is completely petrified and speechless when he realizes he has been cornered by his mentor's intelligence. He swallows hard with great difficulty, feeling that his carrot has come to an end, and that his worst nightmare has come true. With trembling hands, the boy extends his arms, revealing his calloused palms, for the elder's meticulous assessment. The elder examines the young man's hands with a very cold and severe gaze, confirming the recent marks of the use of physical power. In a swift movement, he draws his sword and positions the sharp blade directly against the neck of the frightened boy. Qiangsang lets out a sound of terror as he feels the icy touch of his master's blade and realizes that his life is in real danger. The elder demands that the boy explain why he committed such a terrible atrocity against the sacred laws of Murim. The young man tries to play dumb, but the master warns that he will not tolerate him continuing to lie like that. The master reveals that he saw the boy returning from the destroyed inn, walking happily and smiling down the middle of the street. He remembers the image of the disciple running under the full moonlight with the jade amulet in his hands, as if nothing had happened. The elder states, disappointed, that he feels ashamed to have a disciple capable of committing such terrible crimes against the people. The boy lowers his head with an expression of pure shame and terror as he realizes he can no longer hide the truth. Without the strength to sustain the lie, he falls heavily to his knees on the wooden floor, accepting his total defeat today. He cries out in remorse, confessing to his master that he has committed the worst sin of his entire life as a disciple of Manhwa. The boy confesses, crying, that he was gambling, and from that moment his whole story begins to unfold. He remembers the great emotion he felt when he won his first games and amassed a huge fortune at the gambling house. He then recalls the terrible series of losses that led him to quickly lose all the money he had. The boy remembers the madness he committed when he gambled away the jade amulet given to him by his mentor and closed the deal with the finance company. He recalls the figure of the young assistant with glasses who appeared in the dark alley to oversee the collection process and remember also the enigmatic look on Manager Kim's face, who offered him the easy loan with that frightening smile. The boy desperately explains that his intention was to pay everything back, but the interest kept rising relentlessly. The master asks sternly if he really thought his debt would disappear if he murdered his creditors. Qiangsang stares at the elder in utter horror, realizing that his cruel and desperate logic has been completely exposed. The young man bangs his head on the wooden floor, crying profusely and sincerely apologizing to the master for the sin he has committed. He humbly begs for forgiveness and assures them that he is willing to accept any severe punishment they decide to give. The elder maintains an expression of profound seriousness and severity as he analyzes his pupil's complicated situation. With a calm movement, he removes his sword from the kneeling boy's neck, signaling a truce. The master sheathes his weapon with a dry sound and sternly orders the disciple to stand up. Qiangsang raises his head, his eyes filled with tears and a purple blood mark on his forehead from bending over so much. The old man walks slowly towards the open window of the room, letting out a long sigh of deep concern. He stares into the dark night, lost in thought about the fate of one of the most talented and promising disciples on all of Manhwa. The master explains earnestly that he cannot allow one of the sect's greatest rising stars to fall into total ruin. To the young man's relief, he confesses that he decided to ignore and suppress that terrible event just this once. The boy from Manhwa opens his eyes in surprise and begins to cry, moved by such mercy and kindness from his master. He gazes at the elder with profound gratitude and calls him by the name of master, his voice completely choked with emotion. The veteran warns that this does not mean he approves of the attack against the debt collectors, but explains that there is a greater good at play. The master states that the reputation and good name of Manhwa must be protected at all costs throughout the region. Qiangsang bites his lips hard, crying with shame over his failure, but relieved that he wasn't expelled from his sect. He sheds heartfelt tears of gratitude at the mentor's generosity in deciding to forgive his terrible mistake today. The young man bows again, thanking the master with all his heart for the extraordinary chance to start over there. The master sighs thoughtfully, maintaining his stern leader pose even though he is moved by the situation. He curiously asks if the disciple knows the true identities of the people he attacked. The elder states that even though they are interest collectors, they deserve to have prayers for their souls on the temple mountain. The boy admits he doesn't remember the exact names, but assures that they said they were from the finance company of the great continent. The master remains standing with his back turned, observing the calm moonlight through the open window without paying much attention to the detail. The young man adds that the group leader introduced himself as Manager Kim, and suddenly he feels the master grab his clothes. Elder Hainio pulls at the disciple's robe with extreme force, displaying an expression of pure panic and sudden terror. The boy is startled by his mentor's violent reaction and asks what is suddenly wrong with him. The master's face is completely covered by a dark shadow, and he demands that the young man repeat exactly what he said. Qiangsang becomes quite confused and trembling upon seeing his master's despair, and stammers as he tries to answer his question. He repeats the name of the finance company from the great continent with great apprehension, while the old man begins to sweat with fear. The master begins to tremble violently and squeezes the fabric of his disciple's clothing with his completely trembling hands. The young swordsman is terrified to see that the veteran is in absolute shock just hearing the name of the financier. The elder desperately asks if the name was really Manager Kim and demands to know every possible detail about the man. The disciple stammers in fear, confirming that the man did indeed introduce himself using the name Manager Kim. The veteran sweats profusely and swallows hard with great difficulty, sensing that a great catastrophe is about to happen. His eyes widen in pure terror as he realizes that the personal demon from his past has returned to haunt the sect. The camera pans forward, showing the facade of the great main temple of Manhwa under the cold and mysterious light of the full moon. Quick, desperate footsteps echo through the temple's wooden corridor as the master runs at full speed. He kicks the door of the meditation hall, startling the supreme leader Hyanjong, who is calmly writing a letter. The elder screams in pure panic and despair, calling for the supreme leader of the sect with wide eyes. The leader of Manhwa Hyanjong turns around in surprise, holding his writing brush, and asks the reason for so much noise at night. The elder collapses to his knees, trembling on the wooden floor, desperately stating that the sect is facing a colossal problem. The supreme leader calls for calm, maintaining the posture of a sage, and continues writing his Buddhist proverbs about serenity. He warns that the mind of a Taoist should be like a clean mirror and still water, always undisturbed in the face of danger. The elder ignores the advice to remain calm and yells in terror, announcing that the financier of the great continent has returned. With an unbelievable fright, the supreme leader's brush violently slips on the paper, staining all of his beautiful handwriting. The writing brush falls from Hyanjong's hands, making a dry sound on the floor as he stands completely paralyzed. The object rolls across the wooden floor while the supreme leader stares at the elder in utter shock, unable to speak. He turns completely pale and his eyes widen in terror as he processes the return of his worst nightmare from the past.